I'm attorney Christopher Mitchell.
I'm arts and culture producer Leanne Stella, and you're watching The Artists Forum.
Hello, thank you for joining us here on the Artists Forum. I am your host, Rebecca L. Hargrove, and joining us today is Christopher J.P. Mitchell, Esquire, and he is an entertainment lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So please give us a little bit about your background and tell us how you got started.
Okay, well, we're here in New York. I'm a New Yorker, born in New York, born in the Bronx. Grew up in upstate New York, about an hour away, Orange County. Down in Virginia for a few years in college, and little travels to Los Angeles for a little bit, and back in New York where I have my practice here today.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how you decided to become a lawyer. How does one decide they want to practice law?
That's a good question. I went to college knowing I wanted to be going to law school. I think my first exposure to the legal field was in high school, where we had a mock trial team that my science teacher was a chair of. And to get extra credit in class, he told me I could join his team. I think it was basically, he coerced me into doing it. And although I was a little reluctant at first, I did, and I enjoyed it. I loved it, and I thought that could have been my calling. And I went to college studying business. I always had a passion for business and entrepreneurship, but I knew in one respect or another, I wanted to take that into law school. That's basically how it started.
Okay. And so once you started law school, did you go in knowing you would go into the entertainment business, or did you somehow just find your way to entertainment?
Well, I said I had a passion for business and entrepreneurship. And I always had an affection or appreciation for the entertainment arts. And with the music industry, performing arts as well. I wasn't exactly sure going to law school that's where I wanted to practice, but it was early on in law school, that's where the direction I knew I wanted to take. I took a few courses in intellectual property and music law, and that really sparked an interest, and I knew I wanted to explore it more. And I went out to Los Angeles, Southwestern University Law School as an entertainment and media program, which I was accepted into that program for less than a year, in which I attended. And that is where I was really exposed to sports law, entertainment law, the music industry, the film industry, and I was won over. And I knew at that point that's the direction I wanted to go into after graduation.
Wonderful. So after you graduated, let's see, you had to pass the bar, correct?
Yes.
Correct. So then after you pass the bar, what's your next step?
Well, you wait, because that's the longest. I think it was about 3 months waiting to get the bar results. So I'd like to say I had all the next steps planned, but I think I was just 3 months on ice, praying every day, hoping I'd pass. I interviewed for firms, but a lot of firms, they want to know that you passed before you'd. I should say I applied for firms, and they weren't interviewing until they knew you passed the bar. But once I passed, I knew I was good to go in that respect, and I wanted to continue on my pursuit of the entertainment industry. So I went with a small firm out in Los Angeles where I was practicing in the entertainment industry, and that was representing individual artists, primarily music and film, some publishing. But it was primarily music artists, film, music producers, music artists, things like that.
Wonderful.
That was my first foray into entertainment arts.
Wow. So from your first foray to where you are now, running your own law firm.
Yeah.
how does one get there? Like, what made you make that transition into becoming your own boss in a way?
Yeah, well, it wasn't the smooth transition that I'd like to think of it as. I transitioned out of the entertainment industry for some time, for a little bit of time actually. Representing music artists, especially, it can be difficult at times. It's the industry with the digital music downloading and streaming in the early 2000s made it very difficult for music artists to make money, and to be successful. And the industry was in a little bit of a transition period itself. And at that point, I took it upon myself to transition out as well.
Right.
Yeah, and again, going on my passion for business and entrepreneurship, I found this a good time to hone my other areas of legal skills by practicing business and corporate law. So I was back in New York, worked with a firm in Westchester, New York, and doing a lot of business corporate work, and that ran the gamut of real estate, banking, finance. So several years there where I feel like I left with a stronger skill set, to speak. And it was about that time period in a few years ago where previous clients were coming back around. Now the individual artists were becoming entrepreneurs, where rather than being just an artist, they want to have their own company, be the producer, be the one behind the film project, running the label, so to speak. And I saw that was going to be the wave. And especially with technology and digital media, it's very easy now to just start and run your own company. Well, it's a lot easier than it was in certain respects.
Right.
It still always has its hurdles. And seeing that, I want to get out in front and meet clients in the intersection of artistry and entrepreneurship. And it was with that about 2 years ago, I decided to leave my firm in Westchester and open up my own practice to concentrate on to represent the entrepreneurial artists, so to speak, and represent them as individuals, as business owners.
Great. So we know, as most of us being artists, I myself also being an artist, we know that each artist has a team of people. There's a backing that helps that corporation run.
Definitely.
So what part do you play in the artist team?
Okay. Well, I'm the legal aspect of it. Okay. My firm is the legal team for the artist, and it runs the gamut. So I'd like to say provide a 360 package of services to the artist from prior to. There's always a project, so it's creation, whether it's music album, whether it's a film project, where it's publishing a book, whatever it may be. So I'll get on board with the client for pre-production issues, might be financing deals, production deals, setting up the production team, where it's film editors, whomever it be. A lot of contracts are required in that. A lot of agreements need to be in place before you could even go. So that will be the pre-production issues, financing, things like that. And then after the creation of the work, the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues, I should say, for artists is to protect their product.
Right.
Okay, so and protect and respective intellectual property. So we're copywriting their work, trademarking their work, or as the individual artist, such as yourself as an individual, you have privacy rights, publicity rights that they have to address. So it's my job to make sure they're protected as the individual artists with the rights of privacy, rights of publicity, and their creation. Make sure the intellectual property aspect is created, protected, so they can go on to the next step in monetizing that project.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I hear you saying that the artist needs to protect themselves. Do you think, well, I think in general, a lot of artists may forget about the legal aspect out of, just being excited as emerging artists. We're all just so ready to get out there. What are the big things that most artists forget to protect themselves with? Well,
it's a great point, because artists are artists for a reason. And I say this affectionately because they want you to think of, they're visionaries, they want to think of the creative aspects, and they don't want to think of the business legal side until they have to, until they're presented with it. And it's easy to, have the great product, and they collaborate with other great artists. And it's difficult to think of the business aspect because they really feel it dulls the creative process. So forgetting things like registering copyright, registering trademarks, things like that. How licensing deals after the fact, what they could do as far as when they're monetizing the work, who is getting joint authorship. Okay, is there a joint authorship if they collaborate with another person? Is there, how are royalties can be distributed with if it's for another entity or for themselves? All different issues after the fact when it talks to the business side of making money. Some artists are artists as individuals, but maybe they want to set up a business entity structure for themselves. Okay, nowadays it seems like every artist, whether a music artist or a screenwriter or a photographer, they're their own company. They're creating their own brand.
Absolutely.
So it's all about, a lot of it is about brand creation, brand protection, brand strategy. So a lot is involved, which they don't think about as well. Okay, me, the artist as an individual, operates in a certain lane, but maybe I should set up a company to protect me, the individual. Okay, so as far as, and it can be very financially beneficial or financially detrimental, depending whether or not they do so. So that's one thing of many things that you have to think about as the attorney for the client. Okay, just protecting, insulating themselves as artists and maybe their company as a company.
So as you say, the entrepreneurial artist and starting your own company to protect the individual. What does that entail? Because most artists, we're just taught in our education, if it's conservatory level or not, you're taught that practice, 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 or be the best artist that you are, be best at your craft. How would you aid an artist into becoming a business?
Okay, it's first they have to make that decision that they want to become the business, which is a difficult decision because a lot of times they want to just be the artist. Okay, and you have to explain to them. I have to explain to the client the possible issues surrounding their work, themselves as an individual, and if they don't protect their work and themselves as an individual from the entity versus individual standpoint. Meaning, as an individual, if by accident, of course, it's always by accident, we'll say, they use someone's work without clearance. Maybe a video clip from someone, or for production, or a music soundbite, something, or a picture, or a photograph, or a painting, whatever it may be, without the certain clearances. That person individually could be sued, and they could lose, whatever they own as an individual. If they're if they operate a company, okay, and it could be XYZ Corp that is using this work, then the company is sued, which is not a good thing. You want to avoid that altogether, but at least the individual artist is insulated from that liability. So that's one thing. And then there are also tax considerations from a corporate and individual level, which would take up a whole other episode to discuss. But so it's explaining to the artists that once they put a product out to the world and for commerce, then they have to think like a business person because they are a business. They're for profit automatically.
Awesome. Well, you've given us just a wealth of information here. If there was any last piece of advice or any last bit of information you'd like to leave us about your law firm or anything pertaining to entertainment law, what would that be?
What I would always like to say is for the client is to be diligent. Set the foundation before they start moving, and that's very difficult to tell someone who has the creative juices flowing and they want to start rolling. But it really is get your ducks in a row. Line up whether it be your financing, whether it be your clearances, relicensing, put your copyright, put that all in place. That's the most important part, and then get rolling. And it's never too late to take a step back and go over everything to make sure you have things in place. Seek it's easy for me to say because I'm an attorney. I understand this, but seek professional guidance when you can, because things are easy when the stakes are low. But when the stakes are a lot higher and there's more to lose for the artist, that's when they go back and wish they did certain things in advance.
Wow.
So that's the biggest thing I would tell to an artist.
That was wonderful counsel that we just received from Christopher Mitchell. You can find him online at www.cjpmlawoffices.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Please stay tuned for our next artist here on the Artists Forum. The Artists Forum.
Get connected.
Be heard.
The Artists Forum is a place where artists of all disciplines can network, collaborate, and showcase their work.
On the Artists Forum's AFTV, you'll see interviews with New York's emerging talents in theater, dance, music, visual arts, written word, as well as insights from industry insiders.
Watch us on MNN every other Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I'm Lisa Nicole Wilkerson.
And I'm Rebecca L. Hargrove.
We'll see you on the Artists Forum.
Welcome back to the Artists Forum. Again, I am your host, Rebecca L. Hargrove. Joining me now, we have Leanne Stella, who is an arts and culture producer, joining us from Art In FLUX. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So please tell me a little bit about yourself, definitely about your beginnings and how you came to have Art In FLUX.
Well, I started Art In FLUX about 5 years ago. Shortly after I moved to Harlem, I was looking for the things that I love about New York in my new neighborhood of Harlem. Theater, music, galleries, museums, exhibitions. And that's very much the fabric of Harlem, but you kind of have to dig for it. A lot of it is behind closed doors. There's a lot of brownstone galleries, and until you start to really explore and be engaged within that community, it's a little hard to find. So at the same time, I met a friend that was producing pop-up shops for the fashion industry downtown. And I was looking at how I could pull on my background of events production and pull in the pop-up shop idea for the arts. And that's what started Art In FLUX, which was the pop-up. It started out very much as pop-up art galleries in vacant retail spaces. So kind of getting a little past the things being hidden, but putting it out on the street where people walking to school, walking to work can also engage with the arts.
Wow, so did Art In FLUX always have a stationary location, or did you begin as a pop-up?
No, and it still does move around. So we are in pop-up spaces, vacant retail spaces, but I also say on street corners, in parks and boulevards. This year, we added public art projects. So as part of Flux Art Fair, we produced 40 public art projects in collaboration with the Parks Department and the Department of Transportation and a local alliance.
Wow, so that's a lot of different organizations that you have to work in tandem with to make Art In FLUX be a pop-up and be able to be so in flux.
Yeah, and it does take collaboration. It takes collaboration with the artists that you're working with, other curators, businesses, property owners, but it's also part of what kind of makes it exciting. It creates a challenge and at the same time makes it interesting because the art's always responding to the architecture, the space, the surrounding area. And, you know, I mentioned the public art because then we kind of brought that to another level, like putting the art out in spaces where people could interact with it on an everyday basis. Now you were putting it where they could completely do that on their own terms. So you're walking through a park and you might come upon one of the art projects, and you get to think about that piece of art how you want to think about it.
So tell me, how do you go about scouting your locations and your artists?
It takes a lot of networking. So they are kind of two different categories, but all of it comes together in many ways. But the spaces really takes a lot of network in the community, meeting the people that own property, getting to know the Parks Department, the other local organizations, what spaces are they using, what is a professional place, or where could you create that professional setting to present the artwork?
Do you find that to ever be a challenge?
Oh, it's always a challenge. it's always a challenge. But I guess my passion is what drives it. I'm very passionate about creating the opportunities for artists so that artists can continue to live in our city. I feel that if we want to live in a place where artists can still live, we need to support them in that process. So part of what we're doing is trying to help artists make a living in a sense. I mean, it's a little bit distant, but you're presenting their work in a professional way so that collectors might come see them. Creating opportunity that can boost their careers. When people are looking for mural projects or sculptural projects for new buildings, we're trying to get artists from the community to be the ones that produce those.
Wow. You so seldomly hear people speak like this anymore, where they just want to elevate other artists. Are you yourself an artist?
I'm not. I love being around artists and being around the art, but I'm not an artist myself. My background, I did work for many years in the antique and arts world. So the transition with Art In FLUX has been into the contemporary art world, which is more where my passion is.
And how did you become so passionate? As an artist myself, I'm inspired by performing and being around other performers, but how does a non-artist or non-performer thus get into this world to be inspired?
Well, how would one get in? I think it's...
Or if you say how you got into it.
I think just being around it and actually, growing up, I grew up outside of the city. I've lived here now a little over 20 years, but growing up, my mother would take us into Soho when it was still, you had to find the lofts and climb old stairwells to find the artist lofts and stuff. And she would take us around doing that and to museums and galleries. And I was the one that, I guess, fell in love with the city for that. I'll always remember that. And, the few times that we got to do it, I come from a big family, a family of 7 kids. So she'd always be dragging a bunch of us around with her. Not all of us, but I was the one who loved it.
Oh, wow. So you would say your mom and your parents definitely cultivated that love of the arts?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So about your upbringing, tell me more about what you can take away from your upbringing, your education, and how you apply that to what you do with Art In FLUX.
I think, a big part of that was actually working with my mother. My mother launched a business when, I was 2 years old. She started the antiques and arts business, which I eventually took over. It was actually producing large antique fairs. Working with her instilled a lot of my business acumen and how I work with people and promotional mind about things. A lot of that came from her.
Wow. Do you find the antique world and the contemporary art worlds to be similar or very different?
There's, there's similar structures. There's certain things that are similar. The contemporary world does have its own set of criteria, direction, but there's certain structures that are very similar, sure.
Yes. Okay. So more about Art In FLUX, because I'm very intrigued by this. How large is your team that you work with? It sounds like a lot of work, groundwork that has to go into producing a show.
So the team is very small, but it's a lot of collaboration. I work with a couple of interns, and I have an advisory board that's, I would say to anyone, that's extremely important, especially when you're entering a new field, to surround yourself with professionals that can advise you in direction and how other people might perceive what you're doing, connect you with other people. I've found that to be an extremely important part of what I'm doing.
Oh, great. Absolutely. So I'd love to hear about some of the current events and future events that you all be having.
So currently we have a gallery on Lenox Avenue or Malcolm X Boulevard in Harlem between 118 and 119. And that one is sponsored by a realtor. And we have an exhibition featuring Stan Squirewell that's on through November 9th. And following his exhibition will be an exhibition by Uday Dar, another one of the artists that we're working with. And then beginning 2017, we're working on a curatorial theme of reimagining a city that will then trickle down into individual exhibitions and public art projects.
Wonderful. Well, if there was anything you can impart to artists, emerging artists, or anyone that is interested in being an entrepreneur like yourself, what would you say?
I think, one of the things we just talked about was surrounding yourself with advisors, people that have more experience than you, or experience in areas that are not your area of expertise that can help you. But I also think for artists in particular, they need to put themselves out there. You can't hide your work. If you hide your work, no one's gonna, no one's gonna know. You need to put yourself out there so that you get the reaction. And, I know how hard that is because now I feel it when I'm curating an exhibition.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're saying this is what you think is great. And as an artist too, they're putting their own work out there. So it's hard,
Yes.
but it has to be done. And then I think another thing is to train your eyes. So you need to go out and see other exhibitions. Both as an artist and as an arts professional, it's just important to train your eye, see what's happening, see what's current, and use that as to inform you, not to decide what you'll do,
Yes.
but to inform you. Yeah.
Wonderful. So where can we go to find out more about Art In FLUX and keep up with your exhibitions?
Our website is artinfluxharlem.com, and then we're also on Facebook and Instagram, either as Art In FLUX Harlem or Flux Art Fair.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for watching us here on the Artists Forum. We'll see you next time.